you. So we're going to talk, get a brief, about 10-minute presentation just about how SIREN is structured and sort of the way organizationally that we operate. And I'm sorry, I'll get it up closer. So I think the thing to remember is that, as Jeremy pointed out, SIREN is not a new creation. It's really an evolution that came from both NET and ROC, and sort of our little logo there sort of reflects the fact that these are two different things that are coming together with the little zipper design that you see on there. Unlike the NET, which had 17 hubs to start, SIREN has 11 award hubs, and you can see where those are located. Very similar to the NET, it has a clinical coordinating center, which is at the University of Michigan, and a data coordinating center, which is at Medical University of South Carolina. The specific aims for NET, as written in the grant, were to diligently recruit, efficiently perform, and widely disseminate the most scientific and clinically important trials in emergency patient care. We want to create a culture for clinical trials that is collaborative. I think we did a good job of doing that in NET, as they did in ROC, and I think it's really important that we continue that and make that collaborative and make it an open network that's not just for people who are in the network, but really open to anybody. And really transforming the emergency research enterprise, and through a number of different ways, and Rob will go into some of the details about different trial designs and other things that we might be looking at. But the idea is to really take what was done in the ROC and take what was done in the NET and really move it forward and keep evolving from there and making the whole thing better. Some of the design principles and organizational values, and I think this is useful if you're thinking about trials that might fit into SIREN. We want trials to focus on early treatment. This can be early treatments that starts in the pre-hospital phase of care. It could be starting in the emergency department. It could be starting in the early ICU phase of care, but basically in that emergency care phase, probably, we haven't strictly defined it, but probably in the first 6 to 12 hours. We want to focus on meaningful outcomes for patients. So one of the things we don't want as primary outcomes in SIREN trials are things like financial metrics, or how many dollars we save by patients not coming to the emergency department. So it's got to be something that really is a meaningful outcome for patients. We want to focus on being efficient. I mentioned earlier we want to have a collaborative process, and we want to focus on transforming the clinical trials enterprise. So our team is different than what we had in the NET as well. So we've got a multiple PI leadership plan. There's 3 PIs for the coordinating center, which is myself and Robert and Cliff Calloway from Pittsburgh. And Cliff, as most people know, is involved in both SIREN and in ROC. So he really brings the perspective of the ROC to the new network. From the Data Coordinating Center at Medical University of South Carolina, we've got Yuko Palish and Valerie Durkalski, who were also the leaders for the Statistics and Data Management Center for the NET. And so we've got a lot of experience in working with them over the last 12 years. And then the NIH program leadership, you've met Jeremy already. Carolina Mendoza-Piccini is the Administrative Program Director from NINDS. George Sopko and Emily Tinsley are the program officers from NHLBI, and Lupe Aquino is from NCATS. And the way things are set up, this is obviously a complicated slide, but basically you can see there's a lot of interdigitating parts on here. It's sort of formed around the 4 central pieces of the network. If you look at the corners, we've got the hubs, the left quarter, NIH, the DCC, and the CCC. And the rest of these are sort of how things are organized. You'll notice, and I'll point out just a few things. Does this have a pointer on it? Yes. Here is the trial PI. So the trial PI can be somebody from within the network or outside of the network. And basically the trial PI, the award is given to whoever the trial PI is. So if somebody is from outside of the network and they are the trial PI for this network, they don't have to be part of NET. The award goes to that person and their institution, and then it gets distributed to the rest of the network. The other thing that we've got involved in SIREN is a central IRB, which we did not have involved in the NET or in ROC. So that brings sort of a new management plan to it. And then we've got, similar to the way the NET was set up, we've got our hubs and we've got spokes. We have obviously our management committee, steering committee, which sort of is responsible for the operations and includes membership from all 4 of these parts. And then for each trial, there are operations committee, trial committees, et cetera. And then we've got a number of things out here that Cliff is going to talk about a little bit later in the second part about ways to get involved in the network through the working groups that are involved in SIREN. This just sort of illustrates sort of the contractual arrangements for SIREN and how that's going to work. So if you've got a trial, and let's use Boost for an example, when Boost gets funded, the money goes from NIH to the principal investigator, the trial prime. There you have subcontracts with the DCC and the CCC, and then the Clinical Coordinating Center has the contracts with the performing sites, some of which might be sites that actually got the award. Some will be hubs that are working with sites that got the award, and then there will be a number of these spokes working underneath those hubs. And in some studies, we may very well have ancillary hubs or spokes, so they might be some sites that are sort of outside of that infrastructure, a little bit different, and sites that we might want to add for specific reasons for one trial or another that don't necessarily fit well within the network. And we've found that that occurs in almost every trial that we've been doing. Trial recruitment. So in terms of looking for trials for SIREN, I mentioned earlier we want to have an open clinical trial infrastructure so that basically anybody could propose a clinical trial to SIREN. You don't have to be a member of SIREN. You don't have to be an emergency physician. You don't have to be an MD. You could be a PhD. It just depends on the nature of the study. But anybody could potentially get a trial done in SIREN. We really strongly endorse a collaborative leadership model. So we really want projects where we typically have multiple PIs involved, because these are big projects. There's a lot of work involved. Usually there's a lot of collaboration and work with people from the DCC and the CCC in putting these grants together and the trials together. There's often a PI, doesn't have to be, but there's often a PI from the Clinical Coordinating Center. There's always a PI from the Data Coordinating Center involved with that. While we get involved from the CCC and the DCC, one of the things we try to do is be respectful for the investigators' ownership and control of the science. So when we work with investigators to put these studies together, what we try to do is really add operational experience to how to get these studies done and the way the study's designed to get them done in the most efficient ways. But we don't try to tell the person who's the PI what their science should look like, and we really let them dictate the science of the study. We share operational and statistical responsibilities, and we're responsible for facilitating the implementation and data integrity in all the SIREN trials. So how would you go about looking to get a SIREN trial started? There's a lot of different routes that one may go. One may start, basically, as I mentioned earlier, the trial ideas can come from anybody. Starts with having clinically important questions. From here, one might go directly to NIH program officers. So if somebody had a trial idea that had to do with the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, let's say it was a pulmonary embolism trial, they might start their discussion with the person in NHLBI who's the program officer responsible for lung trials. At some point, either from them or from them, the SIREN emergency team will get notified and get involved. So basically, basically both groups have to get involved at one stage or another. And so typically if people talk to us first, one of the things that we'll do is we'll go to the program directors at the respective institutes to find out about the interest, how that fits with their portfolio, what they're interested in. They'll do the same thing with us. So it's a collaborative venture. And some of you have brought trials to us before, and we've said, gosh, have you talked to a program officer yet? We really would like you to do that, but it's got to be both sides of the spectrum. It can't come from one direction only. It's got to come from both. Once these early discussions are held, which will be with SIREN leadership, and again I mentioned the NIH program officers would be brought in, the SIREN leadership will evaluate the fit for the network and contribute it to the concept and relay it to the site PIs, so the site PIs have an idea of what might be coming. And what we don't do is we're not a layer of scientific peer review. So what we don't do is look at people's grants and mark it up and say, no, 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 you need to do this. We try to really work collaboratively, and we really try to contribute, as I mentioned, on the operational aspects of the trial, not necessarily the scientific aspects. That would go then for a clinical trial summary and rough budget, and if it requires pre-approval, which most of our studies do because they're large, we would go through that process, and then we would work with the investigators to put together the grant application and hopefully get successfully funded. Sources of trials, again, it can come from early referrals from program officers at NIH. It can come from investigators contacting us directly. And we intend to probably try to initiate trials that we think are really important. We might look at things to address gaps that we have in the portfolio and say we need some trials in this area, or priorities among the institutes, or things that come out of retreats or workshops, and we're certainly open to working with industry, although the NET actually did not have any history. We had some forays into maybe doing that, but never actually ended up doing an industry-sponsored trials. So there's a lot of different ways to get trials in there. The important part is it's going to be collaborative. It's going to involve the NIH program officers as well as the SIREN leadership when we're putting those studies together. And that's the end of what I had. I'll give it over to Rob Silverglite.